Hey everybody, welcome back. Today's video is going to be about a list of cars that never really reached their full potential. Cars that really could have been better and could have reached a higher potential but didn't. Just so you know, there's going to be a lot of Acuras and Hondas on this list and it is going to be very disrespectful. I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings. This is your chance to go. This isn't a list of particularly bad cars. It's just they're bad for what they were supposed to be or what they could have been. That's all I'm saying. All right, so the first car on that list is the 2015 to 2017 Chrysler 200. Chrysler 200 was named after the Chrysler Sebring, which wasn't that great of a car either. Then they kind of facelifted it, called it the 200. I rented one of them. It sucked.
We don't care.
Let me tell you.
But then they redesigned it in 2015 and it actually looked good on paper. Chrysler's famous for doing this. A new product looks good on paper, but when you buy the product, and after that first year or two, they sell well, then they don't. Just like the PT Cruiser. So the Chrysler 200 was competing with like the Camry, the Accord, but the thing is it was supposed to look more expensive, like how the Ford Fusion kind of looks nice and looked expensive 2013 and up. They basically did that, but the execution, of course, is bad. Like I said, they always only look good on paper. It wasn't so much the engine was bad, because they had the Pentastar 3.6, which isn't really a bad motor. If you do the maintenance, they're not too terrible. But they had a 9-speed transmission that was terrible, didn't really work that well. It was actually pretty small, like hard to get into, the back seat particularly. For a car that was that size competing with the Camry and Accord, people having to climb through it like it was the tunnels of Vietnam, didn't really sit well with people. It looked nice and it didn't look bad, but the execution was bad. And this is a vehicle that it really does look nice when you see it on the commercial. The interior didn't look cheap, but once you buy it, you start to get the typical Chrysler that lets you know it's a Chrysler. While we're on the subject of transmissions, our next car is going to be pretty much every Nissan that has a CVT transmission. There's so many, I just didn't pick a car out. I might as well just do the whole lineup. Nissan used to be a very special car because they were the reliability of a Honda and a Toyota, but you got it for a lower price and they were actually more pleasant to drive. They were a little more fun to drive. Let me say it that way. They didn't seem as boring. And when you got in a Nissan, it felt kind of exciting. Like it felt like a car that was kind of made for you. It had a nice little aura to it. It didn't just feel like a cheap car that just got thrown together and was like, here, just take it. Over the years, they decided to start using around 2004-ish, using these CVT transmissions. Nissan, even today, the engines aren't that bad. They're not that hard to work on, but the transmissions are so bad. There's not really a lot of shops that want to rebuild them. So if your transmission goes out, it's over for you. That whole transmission brought that entire car company down. It could have been better. And honestly, a lot of people don't know this. My first car was a 2000 Nissan Maxima.
We don't care.
Let me tell you.
Once I knew they were using those transmissions, I was like, nope. So the next vehicle is going to be the 2006 to 2010 range Hummer H3. The Hummer H3 was slightly smaller than the H2 and it was more of like almost like a C-Class Mercedes type of Hummer, to where it was more affordable because the H2, the bigger one, was like $70,000 back then. The only thing that really held this back is that it came out at the wrong time. It was during the recession, during nearly a fuel crisis, because gas was like $5 a gallon, which was maybe like $8 today's money. But it was supposed to compete directly with the Jeep Wrangler, the Toyota 4Runner, and the FJ Cruiser. Honestly, it would have blew the Jeep Wrangler out the water because they offered it with a V8, which was the H3 Alpha, 5.3 V8, the classic Chevy motor of the early 2000s. And it would have done well if it hadn't came out at the wrong time. That's the only reason I'm putting it on this list. It's not that it was a bad execution completely. The vehicle was fine. It was just the timing. But 2018, it would have been perfect. If that had came out today, Jeep Wrangler would be on food stamps.
Fair change.
Because there's no way it would have competed with that, because that had great off-road prowess, just like the Wrangler, would have been likely more reliable. And it was pretty reliable. So next on the list, and I'm going to explain why, because I am reaching a bit, is a 2010 plus Toyota Tundra. And the reason I'm putting on this list is because TRD, which is Toyota's aftermarket performance company, offered a Magnuson supercharger for this Toyota Tundra that brought the horsepower to about 550 and I think about like 550 pound-feet of torque, which would have put it neck and neck with a newer version of the Ford F-150 Lightning, hypothetically. But the Dodge Ram SRT-10, which was the fastest pickup truck in the world, I believe, or production pickup truck in the world at the time, which had the Viper motor. So this would have been a direct competitor if they had just made like a special model for just 1 or 2 years.
like a happy
special Tundra that would have been like TRD Tundra that would have competed with the SRT 10 Ram single cab truck. This would have been perfect for that. It was like a missed opportunity. Nobody really knew that the supercharger exists, I guess. So maybe Toyota thought it wasn't that big of a deal, but it's like, why'd you offer the supercharger? I guess they were like, if you want it, make it yourself.
Get it your damn self.
We'll just leave it at that. Okay, now we're on the Acura part of the list. I have a love-hate relationship with Acura because I love them for what they could be and hate them for what they're not. So next up is the Acura TLX 2014 Plus. And the reason that's on the list is specifically because the Acura TLX was supposed to compete with like the Infiniti Q50, the 3 Series, the C-Class, and the Lexus IS. The issue is it offered like a decent power V6 for the time, but I'm putting it on this list specifically because it's not rear wheel drive. The reason I'm doing this is because Acura always has these weird moments where they kind of want to have one foot in the sport competition, but one foot out. It's like they're scared to really do it. And Acura has an identity crisis, which is probably what hurts their sales. Nobody looks at Acura as like a luxury car. I like forget that that's what they're going for. And also they don't feel like they're a luxury car. When you get in a Lexus, which is made by Toyota, you kind of feel something different than sitting in a Toyota. When you sit in a Lincoln Navigator, it doesn't feel like a Ford Expedition. When you get in a Acura, you know Honda made it. Like it feels like a Honda. The interior isn't exciting. The features aren't exciting. It's not much different than a Honda. And honestly, to me, I think the inside of a 2014 Honda Accord was better than the Acura TLX. It could be rear-wheel drive. It would have a better track performance to me if it was rear-wheel drive instead of their little front bias type of all-wheel drive system they use. Which I get, it's not a bad all-wheel drive system, but if you're going to compete with the 3 Series and the IS, at least make it rear-wheel drive instead of this weird halfway front-wheel drive, all-wheel drive platform that you use for it. That's really the only reason I'm putting the TLX on this list is because it could be a little bit more. The new TLX has the 2-liter turbo, and I guess now they're kind of approaching that, but it's like too little too late. All right, so next up on the list, oh, you know who it is. It is the 2011 to 2016 Honda CRZ, and this should be at the top of every list of every car that should have never been made. And the issue with this car is that it's called the CRZ. So everyone thought this was going to be the second coming of the Honda CRX, and they basically catfished everybody. They showed it at the auto shows, making it seem like it was going to be this cool hatchback, hot hatch that was going to compete with the Golf GTI and all the other hot hatches, when really it was just basically a Honda Insight underneath. It just kind of looked fast. Kind of like the Hyundai Veloster, where the Hyundai Veloster, everyone thought it was going to be that, and the Hyundai Veloster ended up being really slow. That's basically what the Honda CRZ did, but it did it kind of worse because people had actual expectations for this car. And they really could have put like a Civic Type R type of motor in it, and it would have been the hot hatch that would have spanked the GTI Golf. Everyone would have been happy, but nope, they made it some weird little hybrid, but oddly they offered it with a manual. I never really understood the point of that, but that's why that's on the list. That's one of those cars that just launched terribly. This should have never been made. Someone should have just balled that paper up, tossed it in the trash can, and said Kobe, and just left it in there. This is why I do what I do to Honda. As a matter of fact, they're doing it to themselves. It's not even me anymore. They're begging for this. So the last one on this list is going to be the Honda Civic Type R, and it's not a bad car. It's really good, but the reason I'm putting it on the list is because it's not all-wheel drive. And I know they're typically front-wheel drive. It's true to the Honda fanboys, but the reason I'm saying that is because at the time they brought it out, the Focus RS was still around, I think. The Golf R would have been direct competition. New Subaru WRX, well, that would have been an easy layup because I mean, you've seen it. I mean, look at it. That's a flawless victory right there. They didn't even try. Subaru just threw in the towel and gave up. But yes, the Golf R and the Focus RS, I think a all-wheel drive Civic Type R would have been just perfect. That's the only reason I'm putting it on the list, but that's just the list I made for this. I think the next video I'm going to do will be a list of cars that came out at the wrong time. But until next time.